Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Ikulu Weekly. His Excellency President William Ruto this week assented to the Division of Revenue Bill 2026, paving the way for the allocation of 428 billion shillings to county governments. The allocation represents an increase of 13 billion shillings or 15% from the 415 billion shillings allocated in the 2025-2026 financial year.
Makofi tafadhali.
The President also received the report on the framework for compensation and reparation for victims of human rights violations during protests and picketing, prepared by the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights.
I stand here pleased that we have reached this milestone, saddened by the circumstances that have made it necessary, humbled by the trust placed in us by victims and their families, and optimistic that this marks the beginning of the end of a painful chapter in our national life.
In the course of the week, the head of state traveled to Evian-les-Bains in France to attend the 2026 G7 summit, where he was received by President Emmanuel Macron. On the sidelines of the summit, President Ruto held bilateral talks with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz before delivering the lead intervention during the G7 Plus working session on fostering new partnerships and rebuilding international solidarity. The President also held a series of high-level engagements, including talks with World Bank Group President Ajay Banga, Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky, where they discussed cooperation in trade, agriculture and food security. The President held further talks with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Her Excellency Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, and he further joined fellow leaders in discussions on the third day of the summit, focusing on global priorities and strengthening partnerships for sustainable development. President Ruto also held talks with OpenAI Chief Executive Officer Sam Altman on the establishment of Nairobi as the home of the first OpenAI Academy initiative in East Africa. The head of state also met President Lee Jae-myung of South Korea. Their discussions centered on expanding preferential market access for Kenyan products, including tea and coffee, as well as broadening the bilateral labor arrangement to create more employment opportunities for Kenyans to work in South Korea. Additionally, President William Ruto participated in the G7 Plus working session on reviving balanced and shared growth for all, where he underscored Africa's central role in driving future global economic growth. Upon returning from France, the President proceeded to Mombasa, where he toured a marine research vessel owned by the Kingdom of Norway, operating under the United Nations flag and managed by the Institute of Marine Research at the port of Mombasa. Later, the head of state presided over the closing ceremony of the 11th Ocean Conference, where he called on delegates to embrace bold and innovative approaches to mobilizing financing, harnessing technology, and strengthening institutional capacity.
3 years ago, we made a deliberate and conscious decision that the blue economy, our oceans and waters, were not contributing significantly to our gross domestic product and also to our progress as a nation. And I took the decision that I am going to have a dedicated blue economy and fisheries state department.
On the sidelines of the conference, President William Ruto met the UN Secretary-General's Special Envoy for Ocean, Peter Thompson, with whom he discussed enhanced collaboration in advancing sustainable ocean management. He also held talks with the European Union Commissioner for Fisheries and Oceans, Kostas Kadis, on strengthening cooperation in fisheries development and expanding the blue economy. Dr. Ruto further held discussions with President Hussein Ali Mwinyi of Zanzibar. Their meeting reaffirmed the commitment of both sides to deepen cooperation and unlock shared opportunities. The week culminated with President William Ruto presiding over the Africa Chief Justice Alternative Dispute Resolution Summit in Nairobi and thereafter officiating the National Productivity and Performance Conference, also held in the capital. President William Ruto later joined residents of Kipkoror, Nandi County in bidding farewell to Mama Zipporah Koskei, wife of former Cabinet Minister Henry Koskei. The head of state described Mama Zipporah as a great matriarch whose enduring legacy will continue to inspire many. That's it on Ikulu Weekly. Join us next week for more.